Have you ever been in a political debate and felt like you were speaking a different language? Well, what if the political environment itself is actually changing how our brains process information? Today, we're going to jump into a really cool study that put this whole idea under a microscope. We're going to see how political polarization might be shaping our minds in ways we don't even realize.
So let's start with the central question, the big mystery these researchers wanted to solve. When you get right down to it, what wins? Is it a really well-crafted, logical argument? Or is it just knowing what your party thinks? You might have a gut answer, but I promise the truth is way more fascinating and a bit more complicated than it seems.
Okay, before we dive into the experiment, we need to get one key term straight: elite polarization. Now, this sounds academic, but it's pretty simple. It just means, 1, the political parties are super far apart on the issues, and 2, everyone within each party is pretty much on the same page. It's not just random disagreement, it's organized, predictable, team versus team disagreement. This idea is the secret sauce for the whole experiment, so keep it in the back of your mind.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we're going to peek behind the curtain and see how the experiment was set up. Then, we'll break down the results in 3 rounds, kind of like a boxing match. First, arguments go head-to-head. Then, we'll let the political parties step into the ring. And for the final round, we'll see what happens when you crank up the polarization. And then we'll wrap it all up with a big "so what?"
So how in the world do you test something as messy and human as political persuasion in a lab? I mean, it's not like mixing chemicals. Well, these researchers came up with a really clever design to isolate the 2 big forces they wanted to study, the power of a good argument versus the power of your political team. It all came down to a 3-step process. First, they picked a couple of hot-button issues from the real world: offshore oil drilling and the DREAM Act. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, they wrote both strong and weak arguments for both sides of each issue. And finally, they created 3 different political worlds for the people in the study. One world had no parties at all, another had parties that were kind of wishy-washy, and the third had parties that were totally polarized. But right, who decides what makes an argument strong or weak? Well, that's the brilliant part. The researchers didn't decide. They actually pre-tested the arguments on a whole other group of people to see what they thought was persuasive. So for oil drilling, an argument about the economy and jobs, people found that strong. An argument about new drilling technology? Kind of weak. That step makes the whole experiment so much more credible. And this is how they built those different political worlds. It was all about the framing. For some people, they'd read a description saying the parties weren't really that divided on the issue. But for others, they were told the partisan divide was stark, with Democrats on one side and Republicans on the other, no exceptions. Just changing that one little word, stark, had unbelievable consequences, as you're about to see.
All right, round 1. Ding, ding, ding. In this scenario, people just saw the arguments themselves. No party labels, no mention of Democrats or Republicans. The question is as pure as it gets. Without all the political noise, does a good argument actually win? And the answer is a big, resounding yes. Just look at the chart. Those bars show how much people's opinion shifted. In that first cluster, when a strong argument went up against a weak one, bam, opinion moved a lot. But then look over at the third cluster where 2 strong arguments went head-to-head. They basically just canceled each other out. It's clear, right? On our own, we're actually pretty rational. So the verdict from round 1 is simple. Substance is king. When you strip away all the political baggage, people can spot a strong argument and it persuades them. This is our baseline for what a rational debate looks like. But of course, that's not how the real world works, is it?
Okay, let's get to round 2. Now the researchers start to muddy the waters. They add party labels, so participants might see that Republicans are for an issue and Democrats are against it. But, and this is important, they're still in that non-polarized world where the divide isn't described as stark. So, does adding the party name change the game?
The results here are so interesting. Check out the chart. Let's look at the Democrats again. In one scenario, they got a strong argument in favor of drilling from the Republicans and a weak argument against it from their own party. So what did they do? They followed the logic. Their support for drilling shot up. They chose the better argument even when it came from the other team. The only time the party label really mattered was when the arguments were equally strong. Then it acted like a tiebreaker.
So, the verdict after round 2 is a little more complex. Substance still really matters. People aren't just robots blindly following their party. But when the arguments are a toss-up, that's when party loyalty kicks in. It's like a mental shortcut we use when logic alone doesn't give us a clear winner.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the main event. The final round. The arguments are the same, the parties are the same, but the environment is totally different. Now, participants are told that the parties are deeply and starkly polarized on this issue. This is where everything gets turned on its head.
You have to see this to believe it. On the left is the result we just saw, from the non-polarized world where the strong argument won. Now look at the right. This is the polarized world. With the exact same arguments, the results completely flip. Democrats now completely ignore the strong argument from Republicans and follow their own party's weaker argument. Their support for drilling actually goes down. The only thing that changed was the description of the political world, and it made people switch from following logic to following their team. It's a total reversal.
The researchers who ran the study summed it up perfectly. They said that in a polarized world, our partisan-motivated reasoning, that's our desire to be on the right team, just completely overwhelms substance. We stop asking, what's the best idea, and we start asking, what does my side think?
So the final verdict is pretty stark itself. A polarized environment isn't just background noise. It's a powerful signal that changes how we think. It takes that party label from being a simple tiebreaker and turns it into the most important piece of information there is, even more important than the facts of the argument.
Okay, wow. We've seen the experiment. We've seen the mind-bending results. So what's the big takeaway here? Why does a study like this matter to you and me living our lives in the real world?
Well, the study gives us 3 huge takeaways. First, polarization basically puts party endorsements on steroids. They become way more powerful. Second, it makes the actual substance, the facts and logic, matter less. And third, get this, it actually makes us feel more confident in the opinions we form, even though those opinions are based less on information and more on just following the team. How crazy is that?
And that really leaves us with a massive question, doesn't it? If we know that just the feeling of being in a polarized world can short-circuit our rational brains, what do we do about it? How do we fight that little voice in our head that tells us to check the party label before we check the facts? Being a smart, critical consumer of information is a real challenge, and this study shows us just how high the stakes are.